Gospel of John, we talk about the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we talk about that in Catholic theology as the incarnation. And what I find is this work really takes seriously that incarnational theology that, as Sister Effa said, when we go in our body, the body reveals the wisdom of healing. It's not that we are healing other people, but people are finding their own inner healing by encountering that mystery, that divine mystery within themselves.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Among the People. With us today are Sister Effa Nyaki, did I say that correct?
Yep.
And Father Dennis Mormon. And do I use the whole name? And
you can just use
Stephanie Luna, which we call her by Luna because she prefers that. And now both Sister Effa and Father Dennis are in Brazil, am I correct?
Yes.
And where exactly in Brazil? Are you like next door to each other? Are you in the same city? Sister, where are you?
I live in the northeast of Brazil, in the city called João Pessoa in Brazil.
João Pessoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I live in the south of Brazil, in the city of São Paulo, which if you would take a bus, it would be about 42 hours or something bus ride. But airplane is just about 3 hours. So.
Wow.
Right. And Luna, where are you coming to us from?
I'm calling from the West Coast, California to be exact.
And I'm Maryknoll Father Joe Veneroso, up in our headquarters in Westchester. And it also takes 42 hours by bus if the bus breaks down from New York City. So anyway, we're very happy to have Sister Effa and Father Dennis with us, and they're going to be describing their mission in Brazil. So Luna, you have a few questions to start?
Yeah, so just a little bit more context about today's episode. So we're hoping to get this episode out during the time of World Mission Sunday. And so this is really a dedication to mission and a huge focus on why we do mission. So I'll begin by asking, how did your mission journey begin? And we can start with Sister Effa.
Thank you very much. Yes, my mission began back in Tanzania. I was born and raised in Tanzania on the slopes of a mountain, Kilimanjaro. And since I think even in a primary school, I was always a leader in a class in a school. I was always trying to serve others for some reason. And then when I went to secondary school, the same thing. I was involved in the YCS, Young Christian Students. And I was again a leader, and I'm always trying to serve others. And one of the motives we used to talk about in the YCS is like, you have to always reflect and judge about things and just kind of work out why God called you, why were you born? We always reflect about that question. And for me, like, you were born to serve others. So that's where I was coming from. When I finished when I was teaching already, actually, I had my profession as a teacher, and I was teaching in a seminary, and I was also always looking for where I can serve better. So around the villages where I'd worked, I also looked for women groups where I started helping them, kind of taking care of themselves better, their health. And with the whole question of women liberation too, I was quite involved into that. So then I met Maryknoll sisters, in the nearby village where I was teaching. And then they said, well, you do so much work, but all by yourself. Would you like some support? I said, yeah. So they said, well, why don't you join us? Because we are doing the same thing, but we are in a group. So that's when I got an idea actually of joining others. So I joined Maryknoll Sisters. This is how it started. And of course, it just continued growing. And I was always looking into just helping people to realize, to become aware of what can you do better wherever you are. Yeah.
Oh,
And then when I
wonderful.
got to Brazil, I began to look into the healing because that's what you can do better. That's why I found my talent better. I think
Oh,
that's good.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And I feel as though your service to others, not even meeting you in person, and this is all virtual, you still have this very nurturing spirit. So I'm wondering if that's also where it's coming from. So thanks for sharing that. Father Dennis, would you like to answer? How did you begin your mission journey?
Yeah, I already mentioned the long bus rides that we can take sometime in Brazil. And in the beginning, when air travel was more expensive, we always took the bus. So I've taken a lot of these 40-hour bus rides. And on these buses, you're sitting next to a stranger and you get into these conversations. A lot of times strangers will ask you something, they'll ask you a question and they'll tell you about their whole life story on this bus ride. And someone asked me one time, they said, well, what is it that made you want to become a missionary priest? And I kind of surprised myself of what came out of my mouth. Just spontaneously, I said, alcoholism. And I'm like, wow, where did that come from? And I think, in reflecting more on it now, it's just growing up in a family where we had alcoholism. And then when my dad, who was active alcoholic while I was growing up, he got into recovery. And I think his desire to make himself better, to grow and to work on himself, that also inspired my desire to continue growing, and especially spiritually. And so that was a big part of it. So 12-step spirituality influenced my life a lot. Also, I was, my vocation came about. I was doing a master's degree in plant physiology, and I was thinking of going on for my doctorate degree. And I really loved my work. I was working in the lab a lot, but there was something missing. I missed working with people. And prior to working on my master's degree, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Burkina Faso, West Africa. And so I found myself always dreaming about going back overseas, and particularly to Africa, uh, to learn other languages. I just felt the overseas experience, it was always challenging me to continue growing. And, while I was in grad school, I was always into reading scripture, going to mass, and just spirituality in general. I was always interested in. So I think, after a while, I started deciding, I think I need to check this out.
Wonderful. Yeah, you touched a little bit on that discernment piece. I do want to ask, how did you know that you wanted to dedicate your life to mission? And how did you know it was through religious vocation?
Well, I didn't know.
Oh.
And actually, it was kind of a haunting. I would say since my teenage years, this whole idea of priesthood and mission, and it kept coming back to me. So I kind of said, I'm going to go to seminary to put this to rest.
Yeah.
So if I go and I check it out and I say, okay, this is not for me, but I went and I stayed, and it obviously has been life-giving for me. Now that was 29 years ago since I first came to Maryknoll.
Wow. Yeah, God said, gotcha. Joke's on you. Sister Efu?
Yeah.
How about for you? How did you know that you wanted to dedicate your life to mission? Or maybe you didn't know, like Father Dennis.
No, I actually knew. I mean, once I had a lot of questions on how I could, as I say, about service. I always wanted to serve others.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always looking for how. I was searching and searching. And I mean, I will lead here and lead there, and group of women and young people. And then eventually, when I met the Maryknoll sisters, Really, that was the first group that grabbed me because I didn't want to become a religious actually. That was not my focus at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the religious groups in Tanzania were always in habit, and I never liked to wear habit. That was one of the things
Yeah.
I did, like no more, no way. But then when I met the Maryknoll sisters, and they had no habit, and they were doing this wonderful work also, serving others, and they invited me. My sister
Mm.
Sani San Pedro from the Philippines, she was very generous. She followed me actually all over the place. And she said, hey, come join us. Yeah. Then she explained, and I read about Mother Mary Joseph. I read about Mother Mary Joseph. I said, oh, yeah, I think I will go to this group, and this is what I want. Yeah. So
Oh,
I didn't have any doubt at all. Even when I was discerning, and I will meet with the sisters. And one of the meetings, the sisters had some arguments. It was pretty strong. And one of them said, Afu, you still want to join us with this craziness? Sister fighting. I said, nah, that's a human being. I know what I want. I'm looking for, I'm sure that will pass. It's like, that didn't bother me at all. Like, wow, am I going into the right place? Because it was not about the Maryknoll sisters as such. It was about this service thing that was haunting in me. And the Maryknoll sister become this group that is taking me there. So my discernment was very easy. I never felt like these difficulties, whether I go or not. When I found them, I was like, this is it. I can
Now,
save through this. Now, one little thing I just want to say is that with this question of becoming a missionary or not, I actually, when they say, well, you have to go to New York, and then from there you go to another country, I'm like, no, I'll come back to Tanzania. and and this sister Seni knew me already. I had pretty strong personality. Like, no, I want to come to Tanzania. This is what people need me, and there are a lot of people I can serve here. And she said, well, when you go, you will find a lot of places where you will have to serve people. And I said, yeah, I'll come back. Well, she never said anything. And after I arrived in New York, I was in the formation with we were 9 people in the house from 7 different nationalities. Like, my world was like, wow. Yeah. And I started learning from these cultures, and I'll go to these countries, and we're studying about mission. But when I went back to visit in Tanzania before I came to Brazil, she joked. Sister Sene said, oh, what happened? I thought you wanted to come back to Tanzania. I said, no, I thought about that. So that's things just happens like that. Yeah. And I knew I got what I want, really.
Great. Joe, were you trying to say
yeah,
something?
well, as I listened to Sister F, and I've been in mission in the Maryknoll for enough years. During the course of your mission journey, there must have been a high point, like, yes, this is what it's all about. At the same time, there must have been a low point, saying, I should have done that differently. I should have done that better. What a mess I'm in. Would you mind sharing your high point and your low point?
Yes. Well, I'll begin with the low point.
Okay.
So when I got to New York, actually, and I had a terrible culture shock, because everything was so different from Tanzania. I mean, coming from Tanzania, from the village. I mean, I always lived in the village, really, and I come to New York, and Maryknoll is big. Whoever know Maryknoll is huge, with all the sisters, with all the everything, the dining room. I mean, I felt like I was just deported from one world to another. And I'm like, well, so a little bit before I made my first vows, my first commitment to Maryknoll, this is what I want, I had a little bit of a crisis. And I went to do a little bit of a quiet retreat up in the cloister. Maryknoll have the cloister too. It was used to be up on the hill. And I was actually discerning whether I really want to stay or not. And that was a crisis, because I felt like it doesn't make sense to make a vow of poverty in New York, coming from where we had very little, but it was in abundance. We didn't have a lot of material like cars and all these things that I found in New York. but I don't know. I mean, you're just satisfied with what you have, and I never wanted more. And then I'm saying, I'm coming from Tanzania, from where I had very little, and here I have a lot. I would go to Nearly New, we pick up a lot of clothing. Nearly New, it's a place where they recycle stuff. And here I have 2 suitcases of stuff, and I'm like, why do I come from Tanzania, from the village, to make a vow of poverty in this crazy place? So in this crisis, like, no, I think I should go back to Tanzania and save my people the way I wanted to. I met Sister Grace, who is a spiritual director there. She was so kind. I mean, she said one phrase, that was it. I came out of my crisis. What she said to me, she said, well, fool, everything you meet, they are there. You find all these things here. They are there for you to take advantage of it if you wish. But do you have to carry them with you? That was it, she said. I'm like, no, you're right. I can use whatever I need to use. And whatever I don't need, I leave it wherever it is. Someone else will use it. And then I will move on with my journey. I said, oh, yes, thank you. That took about 5 minutes or whatever. I sat with her for 1 hour getting all this mad and this and justice and all that. And then she just said one phrase, 3 minutes, and then we are done. That was it. And that was really good. So the high points, there are many high points. So I'm not
Minute high point.
high points is arriving in Brazil, working with people. Brazilian people are just wonderful. So there's so many moments of high point, like being with the women here. I started an organization, and always working with women and having them share with me what they know, and I share with them what I know. There's one moment I was looking, I'm like, this is my university, because I'm learning so much from them. Every day they bring all these herbs they know, and I'm learning from them. There's one moment I remember saying, oh, I didn't need to go to other higher universities to get degrees and to get more, I mean, to get doctorates and all that. I just have to learn from this university as I'm serving them. Because so I thought I'm doing service to them, but then they turn out to be, they're serving me too. So it became a very mutual thing. And that for me, that moment of realization was my high point.
Excellent. Thank you. Father Dennis, care to weigh in on your high and low points?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I think there were many low points along the way, because I was very idealistic and probably still am to some extent. And so whenever my idealism hit the reality of the way life is, I would be, oh my gosh, go into a questioning. But the questioning somehow, I guess, brought me, as Sister Efu was saying, to something deeper within myself. And it's like, my vocation doesn't depend on this. There's something deeper that is drawing me. And I guess that leads to the high points. I don't identify any big high points, but looking back along the way, I would say it's all been a high point, really, in that I would not change anything. I don't wish I would have chosen a different path. I just see how much this mission life has enabled me to continue growing. And it's what most amazes me about life. We never quit growing. We just, one door keeps opening and many other doors keep opening up. And I guess that's what I really love about mission, is the opportunity to just keep growing, because we're always being challenged in new ways.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you said that. And especially during these times of the pandemic, we're constantly being asked to push a little bit more, be creative. I feel like that has been a huge thing during this pandemic, especially in our work life or even just social life. We have to be creative. So there's definitely a lot of doors being opened right now. So I want to talk about the work that you're currently doing in Brazil. I know I've gotten a little bit of taste of it when I joined a webinar that Sister Efu and I believe it was Karen, I can't remember her last name, but lay missioner who did, Kathy, sorry, who were doing a trauma healing service, and it was really amazing. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, your work that you're doing in Brazil, and why you chose to do trauma and healing?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, upon arrival in Brazil, I immediately looked for where can I plug my service, like I was looking like, and I already see some, when I came, especially in this area, I found that women were there were a lot of violence against women. I mean, lots of trauma. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
we were doing just the dynamics, talking to them, and herbal medicines. But I found that a lot of women had chronic problems of trauma, where they started having hysteric problems, depression, and I never learned anything about that. I'm not a psychologist, so I've never, I didn't know, but I started learning. I said I need to learn methods that will really help these women, because they will over suddenly they will just have a psychic breakout. One of the women in the group here, in our organization, she went to sleep and she started waking up. She wants to beat everybody in the house. And well, of course, they call ambulance, take her to the hospital, and they just give her injections. And then the following day, she comes out like this.
Mm.
Like she just cannot move.
Wow.
And that really just mess up her for a long time. She become like dormant. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, no, 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 we need to do something better than that. So I
Mm-hmm.
started learning different ways of how to go deeper than just the dynamics that they shared among themselves. How can we heal the trauma where they're, like you go beyond the violence? It's not just the violence, but it does something that it's really damaging to their nervous system.
Oh.
So I began to learn. And when you are searching, I know I always say that ask, or that gospel that says, ask, it will be given.
Mm-hmm.
Search,
Mm-hmm.
and you will find. And honestly, those moments, I remember one time I had these women, I needed something beyond what I knew. And I started searching. I found their addresses, and I found a little flyer that is talking about trauma healing, followed it. That's it. This is what I want. Went after it, learned it, then come back. When I came back, I attended so many of them. This is how I found it. And it has been successful, really, throughout all this. I'm talking about 20 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. And
Wonderful.
yes, and so when you sit with people, you help them to they feel better. Even they have been in a torture situation with their
Mm-hmm.
husband or somebody in their family. But in one or two sessions, they already tell you how better they feel with
Wow.
relieving something from their nervous system. It's not about the story of everything. It's about what is happening in their nervous system, make them feel like they are in prison. Once
Mm-hmm.
they can feel that liberty in their body, the bodily sensation, they change and they get a new meaning. And before I started these methods of healing trauma, I used to do these movements, women movement, where
Mm-hmm.
we'll go around in the community. And if women say that they were beaten by the husband, we go and get them and bring them here at the center. But they usually always went back.
Wow.
Eventually, they'll go back to their husbands. I did that with a number of them. And somebody told me, be careful, they will kill you, you know. But I did that, but that was not the answer. So when
Mm-hmm.
I learned this, the first woman I actually applied this, she stayed here for a month because she was severely damaged with the violence. She went back and actually she was able to heal her own husband.
Mm.
And the
Wow.
husband stopped drinking. And today they live peacefully.
Oh,
So that's what
wow.
I needed to discover. Yeah. So when they heal their own trauma,
Mm.
they are no longer a victim. And when they're no longer a victim, they can look at the other person not as an enemy. They understand what has happened, and then both healed. Whoever was a perpetrator and their victim, they heal each other. And then this is what, that's why, I mean, for me, I have just kept on going on it because I found it so beautifully. Yeah, that's what happened, if I answer your question.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful story. And that reminds me of like healers heal. So usually when someone has gone through the healing process, they have the capability of healing other people. So I just really love that story. Father Dennis?
Yeah, I will start from the beginning because I met, Ethel came into Maryknoll 1 year before me,
Yeah.
and I came in the year afterwards. And so we've known each other for about 29 years.
Yes.
And
Wow.
it's interesting. I think one of the things that attracted me to Maryknoll is the strong commitment to reaching out to the marginalized and the excluded and the oppressed in society. And so Ethel, she went to Brazil about a year before I did. And it didn't even really click, but I was attracted to Brazil. Remember, I said I always wanted to go back to Africa. But then I learned that there was so much African influence in Brazil. So I asked to go to Brazil to learn about this. And I remember when I was in language school, writing a letter to Sister Ethel, and because I knew that she worked with the Afro-Brazilian movement.
Right.
And I said, you know, I'm interested in doing this work with the Afro-Brazilian people. And do you think that would be possible? Me as a white North American. And she wrote back this very nice letter and she said, sure, oh yeah, we welcome you, da, 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 da. So anyway, when I ended up, this was about a year and a half after I first went to Brazil, I ended up in João Pessoa, where Sister Ethel was living. And we started working together with the Afro-Brazilian movement. And we started working, a lot of our work was raising awareness about racism in the society and internalized oppression. And we also got into interreligious dialogue with the Afro-Brazilian religions, which I was always very interested in interreligious dialogue, because I find that the contact with other religions also nourishes and helps me to grow deeper in my own faith and spirituality. So that's the way it started, and that's how Sister Ethel and I really connected in Brazil. And then also I started working with what at that time was called the sexual minority community, which nowadays we talk about as LGBTQ, lots of different acronyms, but just being a pastoral presence for this community that was, as Ethel said, with the women, this community also suffers so much violence, a lot of just terrible, awful things that happened. And I remember, you know, myself, I never suffered any violence directly, but the vicarious trauma that I suffered from accompanying that community, I realized I needed to find some help for myself to deal with this. So Sister Ethel, actually, she had already been studying this method of trauma healing. I was studying another type of somatic psychotherapy. And Sister Ethel put me onto this and she said, oh, this will be very helpful for you. So I started doing some of this therapy and it really helped me just very quickly. And I said, wow, this would be a great tool to learn for ministry. Because a lot of times people who are living in precarious situations, you might see them 1 or 2 or 3 times at the most. They're not going to keep coming back to you every week like in traditional psychotherapy. So this method that we studied, I said, this is really going to be helpful. So I ended up studying it and getting into the trauma healing work.
Wow.
And then what really kind of maybe pushed us off was the earthquake in Haiti
Yeah.
in 2010.
Oh.
Yeah.
I went with one of our priests, Father Roman Saint-Ville, who is a Haitian American. And this was just 1 month after the earthquake. And we went to just kind of see what Maryknoll could do to help people on the ground.
Mhm.
And so we went with a medical team, and the doctor said, you know, a lot of these people are having symptoms of something. I can't find anything physically wrong with them, but they feel like they're having a heart attack. They can't breathe. They feel the ground is still moving between them. They're living in fear all the time. He said, the only thing I can do is, as a doctor, is give them tranquilizers.
Wow.
And I said, why don't you direct these people to me? Because these are all symptoms of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was finishing my training in trauma healing. So it was kind of baptism by fire. I just started working with people.
Wow.
And then the following year, we were invited back, and Pax Christi also invited us. So I invited Sister Efu, and her and I created these 5-day workshops where we could help people to learn to heal themselves. And what happens is different parishes from all over Haiti, they would send 2 representatives, and they would be willing to work on their own healing, but then they were also to take this tools that they learned back to their own communities and help their own communities. So we ended up going to Haiti 4 different times in subsequent years and working with that. And then Father Russ Feldmeyer, Maryknoll priest, works probably been 40 some years in Korea, I think. He was asking me about this trauma healing. He says, wow, this sounds just like what we need with the union workers. I'm working with union workers. And in the 1980s, many of them suffered abuse and violence from the government. And he said many of them are still suffering. They're unable to sleep. They get angry all the time. They're paranoid. And so he said, do you think you could come to Korea? I said, just invite us. So he invited Sister Efu and I. And this year we weren't able to go there physically, but this year we completed our 8th year of working with union workers, and it's spread to all kinds of people in Korea.
Wow.
And so this work has spread to, we've worked in Haiti, Brazil, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Uruguay, Chile, China, Bolivia, Peru. And then this last year, we started working in India, in Egypt, in Tanzania, and also the US. And Sister Efu has also worked in Spain and Philippines. So this ministry has really just kind of spread out. And it's a big change in mission, I think. You know, we used to commit to a geographical area, but nowadays we're talking more about situational mission. You know, and trauma healing is a situational mission. Everyone, it's a human condition. We all suffer from trauma. It's not limited to one geographical area, but it's expanding. And I think that's really what mission is about. It's about expanding into the world.
Very nice.
I know I'm going on a little bit, but I'd just like to throw out a question that lots of people ask me. They say, what does this healing ministry have to do with you being a priest? I get that question all the time.
That's a great question.
And for me, it doesn't compute. Like, where is that coming from? Because I said, well, look at Jesus's life. You read the Gospels. What did he do? He traveled around as an itinerant, and he healed people, made people whole. He integrated them back into the community. And I think in some ways, you know, it shows how our church has become, in some sense, very institutionalized and very focused on just the local parish and the local community, which is important. But the whole reason for that is mission. You know, we come
Mhm.
together as community and we nurture our faith and our spirituality so that we can go out and be missioners to the world.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah. I'll say some more about that later, but I'll give Sister Afu a chance.
Yeah, Sister Afu, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, well, I think it's, I just love it the way Father Dennis picked it up from where I left, you know, exactly where,
Mhm.
you know, I began to practice method just with with the women here and Afro-Brazilian people that we work with, and also these sexual minority will invite us to work with spirituality with them, but we always bring it, whenever people invited us from that moment, we will always bring it, the trauma healing into it. And because
Mhm.
we found that whatever problem that suffer from, the answer comes from the body.
Mhm.
If you are well, if your body is feeling good, you are okay.
Yeah.
You can face anything. But when you start feeling discomfort in your body, which this discomfort comes from the trauma itself, the energy that comes from the trauma of defending yourself from, you know, from whatever could have hurt you, and it ended up hurting you anyway, that energy stays in your body, and that's what makes people not feel good. So then
Mhm.
they start responding in many different ways. Sometimes they can also be violent themselves. We have found people who are very violent, but we
Mhm.
realize, by now I realize, I know why they're like that, because they do have some trauma. And if we can get underneath that, then we can help them feel well, feel more comfortable with themselves, and then life moves on. So yeah, that's just Dennis took up and actually explained the whole journey. Now
Mhm.
we picked up from working locally here, and then we ended up becoming international
Mhm.
until now. And it's a wonderful work. I mean, like, talking about continuation, and we just feel like we are growing, and we keep growing on our own healing too. So
Mhm.
I just want to add into that too, that we learned this method of healing trauma that is called somatic experiencing, was begun by Peter Levine, from, as a doctor, you know, in psychology,
Mhm.
and also he does researches. He has written lots of books about, you know, about this method also, yeah, of healing trauma. And then, so, you know, when you're doing the work of healing, you always find little bumps. So I
Mhm.
said, okay, I thought this method of healing trauma, it's it. I will use it with everybody and everything, and it will work. You know, that's how you get into that.
Yeah. One
Yeah, you
size
get
fits
into all
all.
excited. Yeah.
Mhm.
But anyway, I mean, I came across some people who will say, look, I had like 8 accidents, and the car was total every time, every year, in the same place at the same time. And now what I'm afraid of is not the accident itself, but I know the date it's coming, and I might go through it again. And I'm not
Mhm.
sure what is it, because I don't get hurt. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, so we are used to when we hear the accident, we go into healing the trauma from the accident itself.
Right.
So of course he's looking at me, and I'm saying, wow. So how is your body? So I'm feeling very good. Well, there's nothing happening in my bodily sensation. I'm really feeling well. I'm just telling you that it is a mysterious thing. And I'm afraid that I'm getting close, and this is going to happen again. And I just need to look at it. So then I had to look for something different. So I told a friend of mine about this, who was also a psychologist. And she said, yeah, no, psychology doesn't touch into that either.
Mhm.
Okay. So she told me, but I know there's a method called family constellation. And it is excellent. And it's exactly this. It has to do with some ancestral energy that it's repeating from back there, and it's repeating on him
Mhm.
until he become aware. I'm like, what? Wow. Okay, where do I find that? She said, well, on the weekend, I'm going to invite somebody to come and give workshops. I went into it, I learned it, I loved it. And the following week, actually, that guy came back and I attended him and it worked. So from that moment until then, we have, I also introduced this to Dennis, to Father Dennis, and because it actually worked very well with somatic experiencing. So we've been working with these two methods of healing trauma, which we call really is the generational trauma healing. Yeah, it comes
Wow.
from many generations, and we're just repeating it ourselves. Yeah, but when you use this method of family constellation, it helps us to become aware and to cut, yeah, to stop here so that we can live a more fulfilled life while we honor them and being grateful to them. So
Wow.
it stops all the
If,
war system, conflict, and all those kind of things. So
Yeah.
I'll stop there because
if I
I
could
think,
just interject here, yes,
yes,
just to talk about these methods of healing, I think what is different about them than, it's just in the last 20 years that a lot of these methods have been popular, but they integrate the body, the mind, and the spirit, the spirituality, which I think is really helpful. That we're not people that our body is separate from our mind, from our spirituality. We are all one. We're physical, emotional, and spiritual beings. And I understand spirituality as something that is embodied.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
body.
the Gospel of John, we talk about the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we talk about that in Catholic theology as the incarnation. And what I find is this work really takes seriously that incarnational theology that, as Sister F said, when we go in our body, the body reveals the wisdom of healing. It's not that we are healing other people, but people are finding their own inner healing by encountering that mystery, that divine mystery within themselves. And I also understand spirituality is about connection, it's about relationship. It's how we connect with God, with ourselves, with other people. And what happens with trauma, when people have a lot of trauma, they actually literally dissociate oftentimes. They disconnect from their own bodies. And I've really come to understand that I think a lot of the violence committed in the world is committed by people who are disconnected from themselves.
Yeah.
I look at some of the terrible things people do to other people and say, how could another human being do this to another?
Yeah.
And it's because they're totally disconnected from their own self, their own being, their body, their spirit. So what the trauma healing does is actually, I see it as foundational for any kind of spirituality, because it helps. The only way we can experience God is through our bodies, right?
Yeah.
So it brings us back to our bodies. It gives us a foundation for our spirituality so that we can connect with God and that we can connect with other people.
Wow.
And this is Trinitarian. When we talk about God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we're saying God is relationship.
Yes.
God is about this holy dance that we all dance, with God, with ourselves, and with one another. And mission, I think, has to start with that encounter, first of all, with God and ourselves. And then it overflows. I love that verse from Psalm 23. It says, you spread the table before me in the sight of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows.
Yeah.
I think that's what mission is about letting ourselves be anointed. Anointing has to do with body. You know, it's receiving the power of the Spirit into our body and then letting that overflow into the world.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And I feel like you guys all touched on very important pieces. I mean, this is a beautiful episode to really dedicate to World Mission Sunday. You really talked a lot of great words about mission and how mission has changed throughout the years. And just how you are also incorporating other pieces of our world. You touched a little bit about racism, the LGBTQ community, domestic violence, and just how your work is really for the people. So I thank you so much for your work and your dedication to this mission. And this will be the last question for you guys. Especially during this time of pandemic, we're trying to figure out ways, whether that's creative, different ways, or maybe there's very simple ways that we could do mission during this time of pandemic. So what is your advice to people who aren't sure how to do service during this pandemic? Are there small steps that they can take, and how do they do that?
You want to start, Dennis?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, what we always advise people to do at this time first is to be connected to ourselves. Since we talk so much about the body, sometimes we are so disconnected. We do things, we run around, and this is what creates stress or stressful situation. So, like when we can sit even before you leave your house or in the morning or whenever you have a little time, stop a little bit and pay attention to your breathing. Are you breathing? You know, just be in touch with your breathing, be in touch with your body, feel how you're feeling in your body. And then after you connect with yourself, yes, this is self-connection. What Father Dennis was talking about, relationship. It begins with me connecting with my own body, with my own soul, with my own spirit. And then I start looking around. Just look around and connect with whatever I see around. You know, I might see a picture of somebody I remember, oh, that's beautiful. I have forgotten them, or they gave me something wonderful. Then I start feeling good about myself and that person. I'm connecting with the flowers, with the trees. So as I connect with everything that is here, that gives me well-being again. And then I know if I start walking, I'm going out to the world connected to myself, to my environment, to the nature. If I see another human being, it's easier for me to be able to say, hello, how are you doing? So I'm connecting. I'm connected, I'm connecting. Because of all the traumas and all the difficulties that we have had, we are really disconnected from ourselves and from others. So with pandemic, people are yearning to connect so much, so badly. Even though through, you know, when you look at people when they're happy, you can see we're wearing masks, but their eyes communicate. You know, their eyes go like that, and you know, like, oh, there's a smile behind these eyes, yeah. So the connection, yeah, that I can begin first here, and I take it out there as I go out. So that one, and it's very simple. You don't need to do so much to learn or to train, to do course. Just be in touch with that. That's one thing I would say, reminding people that.
Yeah, it's really important, especially right now where we're thinking us versus them, or, you know, my problems are way bigger than other people's problems, but really just being in touch with yourself allows us to be connected with the world. So thank you. Father Dennis?
Yeah, Sister Efu mentioned connection with body. That was going to be the first thing I mentioned also, and maybe a practical, and she talked also about connecting with breath. And a real practical way of doing this is just praying with your breathing. You know, noticing your exhale, just noticing the breath going out, and let it take out of your body everything that's not serving you, memories, things that aren't useful, resentments, emotions that aren't helpful. Just let it go out And then there's a small pause after we exhale. And then automatically the inhale comes in. And we can think of that as the Holy Spirit coming in and filling us with life. You know, the same word in the scriptures for breath is spirit in the Bible.
Yeah.
So, and just letting the breath fill us. We don't pull in the breath. What happens a lot of times is we're sucking in our breath, trying to breathe. And this leads a lot of times to panic and fear, but just letting it come in naturally. And then there's a little pause again, just noticing that pause, and then the breath will go out. Okay, so these little pauses we can almost see as little deaths, or little where there's nothing happening. You know, it's like the ebb and flow of the ocean when the wave comes and it stops and then it goes back. So paying attention to those pauses can really help our breathing self-regulate, so we settle down. But it's also a good way to pray. And I think prayer is about paying attention to the pauses and connecting with our body as we pray. Oftentimes, I think we can use prayer and meditation to disconnect from our bodies, to disconnect from difficult situations. But if we're able to really pray and feel what's happening in our body, go to our body once in a while, notice the sensations, the emotions. Ignatian Spirituality does this really well, where they take scripture verses and you really feel it. You feel yourself in these places. I think that can be very important. And then, so there's connecting with the body, connecting with God through prayer, and then service, I think, is the third. You know, serving others, connecting with others, and especially the excluded and the marginalized. As Efu said, Sister Efu said, these are my teachers. This is my university. This is where we really encounter, oftentimes, deep faith. And I just think of two scriptures real quick. One is Moses before the burning bush, you know, where God speaks and says, I have witnessed the affliction of my people, and I've heard their cry against their oppressors. So God really wanting to lead people from bondage to freedom and liberation. And then Jesus, the way he described his whole ministry. In Luke chapter 4, he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Therefore, he has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and release to prisoners, to announce a year of favor from the Lord. So I think that, you know, service to those people who are most excluded is very important.
Yeah. Talk about the Trinity. Thank you for your wisdom. Father Joe, do you have anything you would like to say?
Well, for me, this has been like a mini retreat. I want to thank Sister F and Father Dennis. I'm like, well, I'm going to steal all of your stuff into my homily, let me tell you. But it was excellent. You know, ironically, the pandemic is one of the few things that actually has united the world, because we're all going through it, even though it's dividing the world. So there's a kind of a paradox there. Yeah. We're united in our separateness.
Yes.
And I encourage any young people who might be listening to this podcast and may be feeling the stirrings of the Spirit, listen to it again from the beginning, because your witnesses were so rich, and there's different sayings you've said, different advice that you had that resonates, I think, will not just with me, but will resonate with young people who want to know, what can I do with my life? How can I make a positive contribution in spite of or because of the pandemic? But I want to thank you again, Sister Efu, Father Dennis, and Luna on the West Coast.
Thank
Maybe
you.
can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Just I think it's important to say that Sister Ethel and I belong to what is called the Maryknoll, Brazil Mission Community. And I think this is probably an important component that we haven't touched upon, that this community response to mission. It's not just individual, but when we enter into mission in a community, this was what was different for me between the Peace Corps and Maryknoll. Peace Corps, I was kind of out on my own, trying to save the world, trying to help people, and it's very difficult. But when you have a community response in mission, that's very enriching. It's like a family. And, we have a mission vision. And I just want to just read what attracted me. The first paragraph of our mission vision in Brazil, it's very short. It says, we work to develop more life-giving structures to live out a participative, collaborative, and intervocational model of community among ourselves, and together as equals, we share ministry and mission through dialogue, partnership, and celebration of life. That's what really attracted me to the Maryknoll Brazil Mission community. And so just like to say, it's a lot of fun. It's an adventure. It's very nourishing also. There is difficulties, there is suffering, there's hardship, but it's all worth it, the joy that comes from that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for adding that.
Thank you.
Sister
Sister Efu.
Okay. This is Maryknoll Father Joe Veneroso and Stephanie Luna and Dennis Mormon and Efu Iñaki for Among the People. Please tune in again, and we hope to hear from all of you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. God bless.
To learn more about the work of Maryknoll around the world, visit our website, maryknollsociety.org. Or if you'd like to subscribe to our English or Spanish magazines, visit maryknollmagazine.org. We'd really like to hear what you have to say about this episode, so please leave your reviews, comments, or questions below. And feel free to share this podcast with friends or anyone you feel may be interested. This has been Maryknoll Father Joe Veneroso for Among the People. Till next time.